think we're good to go. I think the camera is on. Video is videoing. Mic is on. Put this on. Put it on. Okay. Okay. Silence. Put this on. Silence. Okay. We begin the current Daf, Masechta Shabbos Daf Lamed Zayin. Begin 11 lines down at the top of the Yomid, but the Gemara continues the discussion of the previous Daf. Asher is co-sponsored by Kal Zich Necheskel, Torah Anytime, and Daf HaChaim. Some ideas we're going to be speaking about today's Daf is the first half of the Daf is going to be discussing the question we had from the previous Daf. We opened up the Mishnah, the Parakira, regarding the permissibility and the prohibition of what is allowed to be put on the stove from before Shabbos. So he said you're not allowed to put when the flame is a certain type that you could be mechata, that you could stoke it, and we're concerned you might come to create havara on Shabbos, a flame which is forbidden. So he said that when you have those types of coals, when it is something coals like made out of wood or that mark. So then we said, you're not allowed to put it on until sheyigrif, until you first go ahead and you shovel it out, or that you cover it with ashes. So the question is, when it says leyitin, what does leyitin mean? Does leyitin mean that you're not allowed to put it back until you did gufa ketuma, like we'll call that the blech? You're not allowed to put it back? Or did we say that you're not allowed to put it on in the first place from before Shabbos, which is called shehiyah? That was the question we had, and the Gemara attempts two different proofs to try to explain that. Another case we're going to be speaking about in the Gemara is the next half of the next question in the Gemara is what's called smicha. So, okay, up until now we talk about on top of it. We're going to talk about regarding inside of it. What's it on the side of it? Let's say you didn't do gufa ketuma. Are you allowed to put a pot on the side, which commonly people do things like that, like putting it on the side of the blech? Are you allowed to do that? Another discussion is going to be regarding the opinion of the chacham. We discussed shortly on the previous daf regarding machlekes chacham and chananya. How much has to be, which is very much tied into that machlekes, as we're going to explain, of how to explain the Mishnah, is the Torah only prohibited as chazaro or even as shehiyah. Chacham hold that you're not allowed to leave food that's not fully cooked on the flame before Shabbos. It has to be fully cooked. The question, however, that's discussed is what's called mitztamik v'yafaloi. Let's say it's fully cooked, but as the classic chalent, the more it cooks, the better it gets. That's mitztamik v'yafaloi. That's the question. Maybe you're going to be mechata then. And maybe you do need a blech, even if it's fully cooked. That's going to be a discussion we're going to have. Now, some of the primary ideas that we're going to be discussing, which are going to come up, are just important terms to always remember. Shehiyah is leaving a pot on from before Shabbos. So on Shabbos, you're not doing anything. That still might be rabbinically prohibited as shehiyah. That is depending on how much the status of it is uncooked. Then there's that's related to shemei chata b'gacham, that one might come to stoke the coals because it's burning out and the chalent's not going to cook well enough. You might come to move it and forget that it's Shabbos. Then there's garif and katim, which are two ways of ameliorating that problem. Garif is shoveling out the coals, so you're not going to have what to be machata. And katim is covering with ashes, so that serves as a reminder and then also diminishes some of the heat. And then there's mitztamik v'yafalei, which this yummy pot of food that although it's fully cooked, but the more it cooks, the better it gets. That's going to be a question we're going to discuss on the base. So we begin the current daf, Toshima. So the Gemara is going to try to bring two rayas on either side. When we had this question, when it says lo yitain, is that lishos or is that lahagzer? The Gemara is going to bring a raya, two different rayas, that gufa ketuma is either only to permit chazara, or that gufa ketuma is coming to permit even shehiyah, which that would depend on how you interpret what the words of the Mishnah were, lishos or lahagzer. Toshima. Let's go to raya number one. The Gemara is going to bring a raya like Chananya, that the wording was lahachzer. What do you have to first put on the block? What do you have to do to shovel out the coals or cover with ashes to permit it? It's only putting it back on Shabbos. Before Shabbos, it could be even a third of it just cooked. It doesn't even have to be fully cooked. You don't have to have gufa ketuma. We're not concerned. That's like Chananya, that was we mentioned. What's the raya? Because so this Amoira in the name of Rab, says like this. He says, Lo Yishanu, we didn't learn the permissibility of the halacha, the Mishnah, which it's not clear yet what that's talking about, but the permissibility is Ela al Gaba, is only on top of the stove, because it's not so much heat on the top of the oven. So that's what we say is permissible. Avol Teicha Aser. But inside the oven, okay, that's in the coals itself, that's going to be forbidden. Or else we'll see exactly what's inside the oven. But on top of the oven is what we say is permitted, but not inside the oven. That's what he says regarding the halacha of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara as follows. If you're going to say, lahachzer tanan, that what did we say in the Mishnah? We said you're not allowed to return it. Meaning regarding leaving on, as we're about to explain, that we never spoke about. What did we say in the Mishnah that lo yitain? When are you not supposed to put on? That's regarding on Shabbos, meaning putting it back on. But regarding leaving it on from before Shabbos, then you can leave it on even without grufa, even without shoveling out the coals. Now, how do we say that? What do we mean? Didn't we say the Mishnah says first layit, and then later on in the Mishnah talks about chazar? Oh, that's what we said on the top of the summit from the previous daf. We said what's called chesur mechsra. We said, and Taisa explained why do we go through chesur mechsra? Because really we want to say the Mishnah is like Hananya, because Taisa says and Rashi says that we rule like Hananya, which is a more lenient interpretation. That, we said this word's missing. And really what it's saying is that it's talking about the prohibition of chazar. And then later on, the end of the Mishnah, it qualifies. And who did we say this like? It was like Beis Hillel, because Beis Shammai disagrees. Now, on that says the Gemara, so Reb Chelbai would be going on that diuk that we're saying that to be shayhed, to leave it on from before Shabbos, is on when it's in the grufa, when the coals weren't shoveled out. So then I could understand his halacha. Because Haini Dishana ben Teichel al Gaba. That's why it's differentiating between where you're putting the pot of food, if it's on the top or on the bottom. Why? Because as Rashi explains, because if you're leaving the pot from before Shabbos inside the oven, and you're telling me it's in the groove because you could do shiur, you could leave a food on the stove from before Shabbos, according to Chananya, without shoveling out the coals, then you're doing what's called hatmana beremet. You're insulating a pot inside the hot coals, which we said in the previous daf. That's clearly aser as hatmana. The place can discuss in Rashi is it really hatmana? Hatmana has to be it's totally covered. But the point is that it's the same concept, which is aser from before Shabbos. So I can understand why. Obviously, you might be machat b'gecham. You're in the coals itself. I can understand why they would be different at the bottom from the top. The top, you're not in the coals, and it's already a third cooked according to Chanan. You say not going to be machat b'gecham. But that's only if you say like Chananya. If you say that the Mishnah was lahav zutanan, it was only saying, well, you have to have gufa ketuma only when you want to put it back. But for leaving on, you don't need. But if you say that the Mishnah was talking about that it was telling you that even to leave on from before Shabbos, you need to have gufa. And that's like the Chachamim who say, no, even to have Shabbos, you can't leave on something on the pot, on the fire without putting on the blech, without shoveling out the coals, because if it's not fully cooked, you might be mechad b'gechon. So then the question is, if you're telling me that the case you're discussing of the permissibility of the Mishnah is specifically when there's no coals on the bottom, and it's from before Shabbos that you're putting it there, so mali taicha. So what's the difference if you're putting it inside? Mali al gabay, putting it on the top. There's no coals there anyway. Who cares where you're putting it? You're putting it from before Shabbos, so you're not doing anything, any action that's wrong. And additionally, so what's the concern? There are no coals. You shoved it out already. So obviously, we're going to say that's lahar zutanan, which is like Chananya. Says the Gemara, no. It's not a riot. Misabed, do you think that Reb Chelbai's halacha that he says that we only permitted you on top, not inside? You thought areisha koi? You thought it was going on the halacha, which says in the Mishnah that when are we allowed to let you do this nesina? It's only at sheyigrif, only until you do gufa, which we said. So then that only makes sense, like we said, if you say it's going lahar zutanan. But lishais, then we said doesn't make sense, because if you're doing grufa, what's the difference, teicha or al kabah? Says the Gemara, no, as seifa koi. His halachic qualification of the Mishnah was going on the seifa. What's the seifa? If it's going in the reishi, right, regarding shia, it doesn't make a difference to the top or the bottom. But even the other interpretations, they also have a part of the Mishnah that talks about lahagzer. Even though the reish is prohibiting shehiyah too, but the end of the Mishnah said, they say, af machzirin, that you could even do chazara, which is, but, as the Gemara explains, even Beis Hillel holds you allowed to do chazara, but everyone agrees that it has to be on grufa ketuma. Now, that is what V'amar b'chel b'amar v'cham b'goyim or Rav. He says, Leishana, we didn't learn that you're allowed to do chazar according to Beis Hillel, ella al gaba, only on the top of the stove. Avot toicha asa, but the inside is forbidden. As the place can explain, what do you mean? Even here, why chazara is going to be different the top of the or on the inside, but as we said, according to Beis Hillel, even though he permits chazar, everyone agrees that it has to be grufa ketuma. Has to be, because or else as you're coming to put it back, you might stoke the coals. It has to be shoveled out to end up on top of the bottom. So that's another concept Rashi alluded to in the Mishnah. What's called mechzikim avashal. If you're putting inside right here on Shabbos, that looks like you're cooking. So that you can't do. On the top is lesser of an intensity, and therefore that's going to be permitted. So therefore it's not a raya, because we could say that yes, Reb Chelba's halach is even if you say lishais tenan. Lishais, we said, for shehiyah, so there shouldn't be any difference top or bottom because you're doing from before Shabbos and it has to be gufa ketuma. No, it's not going on the reish, it's going on the seifa. The seifa that is also Toma Chazara, that's what they're saying for Rav is only on the top and not on the bottom. Why not? Why not on the bottom? When you're putting back, everyone agrees it's gufa ketuma too, so what should be the difference? If it is inside, it looks like mavashal more than on the top, and therefore the permissibility of Chazara was only on the top, not inside the oven itself. That was raya number one. Tashma, the Gemara says, let's try to bring another raya, which Allah actually follows like this braysim. Tashma, this would be a raya lishas tanan, no nalichananya, that the requirement of gufa ketuma was that you're not allowed to leave your pot on the fire, even if it's a third cooked, half cooked, 3/4 cooked. No, until it's fully cooked, you're not allowed to leave on unless you do gufa ketuma, unless you do what's called a blach. What's the raya? Because the brayso says as follows: Beis curious hamasimois, if you have two matching stoves, twin stoves. What that means to say is that if you have them attached one to the other, and you have a wall of earthenware that separates between the two of them. So in that says the Gemara, one of them is shoveled out the coals. One of them doesn't have the coal shoveled out. So it says the Bryce as follows: Mashin al gabe gufa ketuma. You're allowed to delay. You're allowed to leave on the one that is shoveled out. We're not concerned that you might have the steam rising from the other one. But you're not allowed to leave it on the one that's not shoveled out from. So you have these two stoves. One they're literally connected one with the other, and doesn't make a difference. You're still allowed to leave on the one that is shoveled out, and you're not allowed to leave on the one that's not shoveled out. Now. And we're going to reference this brayso later on for another halacha. But for now, we have a machlekes tanoim, how to have an understanding of a machlekes tanoim, which is umahin mashin. So really, this case is not so relevant regarding what we're about to discuss. Just happens to say the same thing is even if the two ovens are attached. But the point is, the one who's not gufa ketuma, you can't leave stuff on because the coals are still there. And the one that even if it's attached, but the one that is shoveled out, you're allowed to leave stuff on there. Now, umahin mash says the brayso. So when the one that's garuf, the one that's shoveled out, what are you allowed to leave on from before Shabbos? So we have this machlekes which you mentioned in the Mishnah, but we're going to ask and try to compare it to the halacha of our Mishnah. Beishamar, they say v'loy klum. You can't leave anything on from before Shabbos. Now, Beisolam, they say chamen, hot water, abaloy tavshel, but not a cooked dish. Hot water is something that's generally in the stomach. For raloy, it doesn't really get better. So you're not going to come to stoke the coals. A cooked dish, no, you're not allowed to leave on. That's both of them in their regards to shehiyah. Now, akar, if you took it off the fire, divrei hakol le'achzer. Everyone agrees you're not allowed to put it back on Shabbos. That's the Meir. So he's the most stringent of all what we've seen so far of the laws of shiur and chazar. Now, that's one version of the machlekes b'sham Mesil. Rabbi Yehuda, he says, no, regarding shehiyah, b'sham ha'imim chamen abaloy tavshel. This is starting to sound like our Mishnah. That hot water you're allowed to leave on from before Shabbos, but not a cooked dish. B'sulam, they say chamen v'tavshel. No, from before Shabbos you're allowed to leave on hot water and a cooked dish. Now, and this is all with gufa ketuma. Obviously, we're talking about the stovetop that is shoveled out, that has a blach. Now, then regarding chazara, b'shamar, they say noit lam v'loy machzir. You're allowed to take it off at Shabbos, but you're not allowed to put it back. B'sulam, af machzir, you're allowed to even put it back. Okay, now this is where the Gemara is going to bring the raya from. If you say that the ratio of our Mishnah was lishais tanan, we're trying to bring a raya that it was talking about the obligation of a grufa of shoveling out the coals, even for leaving on from before Shabbos. And that's where the dispute b'sham misil was regarding shehiyah. When you shovel it out, are you allowed to leave on hot water or are you allowed to leave on a cooked dish? And then the Sefer, the Mishnah was talking about the machlokes regarding Chazara. Are you allowed to do Chazara at all? So Masnin Mani, who would the Tana of the Mishnah be? Very simply, Rabbi Yehuda. It's opinion Rabbi Yehuda, who that's what he says, that the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is regarding Shehiyah and Chazara. Beis Shammai permit Shehiyah with hot water on a cure that was Gufa Ketuma. Beis Hillel permit Shehiyah with cooked food on a cure that was Gufa and Ketuma, meaning even cooked food. So so they were the same thing as our Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda as Shehiyah, and regarding Chazara. But if you say that the wording of our Mishnah was talking about that when do you need to have Gufa Ketuma? Is only when you're putting back on Shabbos, but for Shehiyah to leave them from before Shabbos, you don't have to put on a blach, you don't have to shovel out the coals. And therefore the dispute of the hot water and the cooked dish regarding Shehiyah of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel was when it was not shoveled out, as we explained in the previous stuff in the top of the summit, that there are words missing, and we explained that that's the case that they're discussing. To do Shehiyah, you could do it, they agree, even without Gufa Ketuma, but then their machlok is just regarding what could be done. So then says the Gemara, Masni and Mani. So who's the Mishnah like? Not like either one of these two Tanoic opinions we mentioned in the Brisa. Lo Rabbi Yehuda, but Lo Rabbi Meir, as the Gemara explains. Reb Meir, if you would think the Tana of Mishnah is Reb Meir, then you really have it difficult. Because Kashi, you have first of all difficulty with Beis Shammai b'chada. You have one difficulty with Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says in our Mishnah that you're allowed to leave on hot water, even, and this is how we explained it if we're going to say like Chananya, who we're trying to resolve it for, according to the Girsa of Lahar Zitznan, is even if you didn't shovel off the coals, Beis Shammai, which is the most stringent opinion, agrees you're allowed to leave on hot water. Here Reb Meir is saying, according to Beis Shammai, even if it's shoveled out with coals, it's forbidden to do Shehiyah, and for sure if you didn't shovel out the coals. Now, as Rashi explains, that's the Gemara is calling that one question, because Beis Shammai doesn't differentiate between if the coals are shoveled out or not. So it's just, in our Mishnah, he permits Shehiyah. Here, he doesn't permit Shehiyah, even if it's Garif. That's one difficulty according to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel b'tarti. And according to Beis Hillel, if you're saying our Mishnah like Rameh, you would have two difficulties. In the Mishnah, Beis Hillel permits to do Shehiyah, to leave it on the stove from before Shabbos, with hot water and a cooked dish. Even if the coals were not shoveled out, because we're going like Hanan, who says, it doesn't have to be fully cooked, and you don't need a blech. And here in the Brace it says, no, when the coals are shoveled out, when it's grufa, then hot water, yes, and a cooked dish, not. That's part one of this one. And part two is that when it's not shoveled out, you're not do Shehiyah at all. So that's for sure not like our Mishnah. And then regarding Chazara, we also have a contradiction. Regarding Chazar in our Mishnah, we said that if the coals are shoveled out, you have grufa, what's called a blech. According to Beis Hillel, you're allowed to put it back on. Here, according to Reb Meir, he says if you took it off, everyone, even according to Beis Hillel, is going to be, you can't put it back on. So you'd have two difficulties. Now, that's if it would be Reb Meir. So Reb Meir definitely would be difficult to say like. But Rabbi Yehuda, even if you're going to say the Tana of our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda, who he really says the same type of wording as our Mishnah, the difficulty is, but kasha grufa ketuma. You have still have a difficulty regarding shoveling out the coals. In our Mishnah, you explained, according to Chananya, that the first machlokes in the Mishnah that they had regarding Shehiyah was Chazara, but the inferential has regarding Shehiyah, was talking about when you did not shovel out the coals. That's when you're saying you're not allowed to do Chazara. But that's what he said, what came out was, but the Beis Shammai were discussing then regarding what the permitted Shehiyah is. Beis Shammai permits to do Shehiyah by hot water, and Beis Hillel permits to do Shehiyah with hot water and with cooked drink without even doing Gufa Ketuma. And here in this brisa, we said according to Yehuda that you're not allowed to do Shehiyah on something that's not Garfa Katam at all. Their whole machlokes regarding what's permitted to do Shehiyah with is only if it's Gufa Ketuma. So even if you're going to say that it would sound like Rabbi Yehuda, but do you need Shehiyah, regarding Shehiyah, leaving off from before Shabbos, do you need Gufa Ketuma or not? Obviously the Mishnah is not like Hananya, and obviously that what we said in the Mishnah was Lishays Tanan, and then the Tana of the Mishnah is going to be like Rabbi Yehuda. So and that says the Gemara, no. Truthfully, I'll tell you that the gears of the Mishnah is like we said for Chananya. That the only thing you need Gufa Ketuma for is putting it back on Shabbos. The Tana did not, some of the Rabbi Yehuda b'chada, that our Tana of the Mishnah holds like Rabbi Yehuda by one, and he disagrees with him in another one, meaning it's like Rabbi Yehuda, it's just that he disagrees on one point. Some of the Rabbi Yehuda b'chada, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda by one point, which is that he explained the machlokes Beis Shammai regarding Shehiyah, Becham, and V'tavshel, as our Mishnah says, so Rabbi Yehuda says. Beis Shammai permit to leave on hot water, but not a cooked dish. Beis Hillel permit hot water in a cooked dish, which is not like Reb Meir, who we said according to Beis Shammai, not allowed to leave on anything. So that's where he agrees with him. But, and also where he agrees with him is also regarding V'noit l'machzirin, regarding if you're allowed to take off according to everyone, question is are you allowed to put back on. So that's exactly like Rabbi Yehuda. But on one point he disagrees with him. The Ilu Tana the Dan Sab, because the Tana of our Mishnah holds Lishais, you're allowed to leave on from before Shabbos, Vavapisha in the Garvakata, even though it wasn't shoveled out and covered with ashes. He holds, as we see in the Brisa, but Lishais Nami, no, even to leave on from before Shabbos, Garvakatim in. Only if it's shoveled out and covered with ashes, then yes. But Eli, but if not, not. And the Gemara does not resolve this question regarding what is the Girsa of the Mishnah. When we said in the opening of this parak, this Mishnah, regarding a stove that has a heat source that could be stoked, it could be raked, like with wood, with anything that makes like charcoal. So he said you can't put it on until it's shoveled out or covered with ashes. There's a machlokes which goes down to even to the contemporary poskim, meaning all the way to the Machaber and to the Ramah, and even regarding the Mishnah Berurah discusses what the halacha is regarding, is it only for chazara, for putting back on Shabbos that you need gar for cotton, but before Shabbos, if it's a third cooked, you could leave it on the fire even without a blech, which is the halacha, and that is the lenient interpretation of the Ramah, or as the Machaber, the Shulchan Aruch says to be stringent, and it says that it's forbidden, and the Mishnah Berurah says to be stringent like that, is until it's fully cooked. No, even for shehiyah, for leaving on, that's the girsa of lishais tanan, that no, you can't put it on until it's gufa ketuma. But the Gemara does not resolve that question, and therefore that's why we have this big machlokes haposkim. Now, that we're going to come back later, as we mentioned before, regarding one of the cases we mentioned in passing beforehand, as we were trying to bring a raya, the Gemara introduced the following question. The following halacha. Ma'u lismach, but what's halacha? Can you leave a pot next to the wall of the stove without shoveling out the coals? Because in Talmudic times, their stoves were movable, and they would generally leave it on the ground. So the question is, can you leave this pot right near the wall of the stove? If it wasn't gar, if it wasn't katim, you have the coals right there, what's the halacha? You're allowed to do smicha, as the Gemara explains the question. That is taicha v'gaba, regarding putting inside the oven or putting it on top of the oven, which on top of the oven would be on the thickness over here of the wall, or on top of that's the open space over here. Either one. The halacha is aser. If you didn't shovel out the coals, we said that's forbidden. And Tais discusses if the question here is regarding shiur or chazar. It depends, whichever opinion you hold that it's forbidden. Chananya, Rabbanan, or it's not even a third cooked, and then it would be even the problem about shiur according to Chananya. But really, as a may, if we're talking about a case that on top and then inside that's forbidden, but to lean it right next to it, that's not the same thing. It's not on the stove or in the stove. It's on the side of the stove. Then we're not concerned. It doesn't look like regular cooking. Then we're not concerned shemichata. Maybe no, loishla. Doesn't make a difference. We're still concerned. You're leaving it right next to you. You want it to cook. You might just push something of the coals. Something stuck over there, and then it flare up, and then the food will cook. What's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Tosh Matzming a raya from that brisa we mentioned previously. We mentioned in passing, we're trying to bring a raya from that brisa which introduced the machlokes Rabbeinu Yehuda, which we said over there was parenthetical, that it was two twin stoves right near each other. But here it's the main part of the raya. Shtei kriyas hamasimas, if you have two twin stoves, achas gufas v'ketuma, one is shoveled out from the coals or covered with ashes, v'achas she'ein gufas v'ketuma, the other one is not shoveled out. So the halacha is mashal agabe gufas v'ketuma. We said that the one that's not gar v'katim, you cannot put the food on top of it, but the one that is shoveled out, you could leave the food on it. Now, says the Gemara, the Raya, v'avagav dekosolik lehav l'midach, although you're getting the heat, because right next to it, it's smicha essentially, you're getting the heat from the coals, still you see you're allowed to go ahead and leave it on over there, so you see that lismach shari is permitted. Says the Gemara, no, dimashan the maybe there's different. Why? The kivin, the medallia, since the pot is up in the air on top of the stove, showed bavir, so the airspace, the ventilation gets to the pot, therefore it doesn't get so much heat. Therefore maybe it's going to be permitted. But if it was right next to it on the floor, like we said, then maybe it's going to really get heated up, and then you're really going to try to cook this thing, and then we're concerned shabichat, and maybe there's no raya from that brisa. So the Gemara says, okay, Toshmat try to bring another raya. The Amar of Safra Amar of Chia says, kitma, if a person went and covered the fire with ashes, so you put on appropriate blech, but v'nislapsa, and then got and flared up again, which even though you put ashes, that got consumed too. Says Reb Chia, it's okay. Semchala, you're allowed to put food near that stove. Makayim allow. You could even leave stuff on top of it. Meaning, although it's what do you mean? It's not. There's no blech over here anymore because the ashes are not here. It doesn't make a difference. Since you put on the ashes, you're allowed to leave it on it. But night you can take it off from it on Shabbos, and you can put it back on Shabbos. Okay, But one thing says the Gemara, Shmamino, obviously we can infer from this halacha that lis moichanami, to do smicha also, to leave it near the oven, obviously you see it's only kitma in. Only if you had covered it with ashes, then yes, le kitma loy. But if you didn't cover it with ashes, obviously not. Because when you're coming to say that, although it got flared up, you would think, as we're going to discuss in the midbays, it got flared up, okay, the blech is like the blech fell off. How does that help? No, it helps because since I put on ashes, I showed that I want to cool it down. I'm showing that I'm not interested in making it more of a heat. So even though it gets flared up, it's okay. We're going to remain with the permissibility of that kitma. And what's one of the things we say you're allowed to do now that you did katum was being saimich. Obviously, that if you didn't do katima, you didn't shovel out the coals or cover it with ashes, then you wouldn't be able to be saimich. Says the Gemara, no. According to your reasoning, then one of the cases we mentioned there in that halacha was that you're also allowed to take from it on Shabbos and put it back. So when you're saying that you're allowed to take off from it, are you going to make the same deek, the same inference? Oh, kitma in. Only if you covered the coals with ashes, then you're allowed to take it off on Shabbos. But like kitma loy, but if you don't cover the ashes, you're not take it off? What do you mean? Everyone agrees you're allowed to take it off on Shabbos, no matter what the situation is. You're not making it worse. If anything, you're making it better. So Ella, obviously, Tan and Neitlim, when we said that you're allowed to take it off, it was only Mishum Machzirin, only because we wanted to keep it regarding taking it off. Said you're allowed, meaning putting it back on. So you're allowed to take it off, you're allowed to put it back on. But obviously, the taking off wasn't specifically because of Garvakata. So therefore, he rejects the right. Says, Hachanam here also. Tan and when we said you're allowed to leave it nearby, is Mishum Mekayim, because we wanted also to say that you're allowed to leave it on top. So just like parenthetical to taking off, we said you're allowed to, putting back on, we said you're allowed to take it off. So to said regarding keeping it on top, we said you're allowed to leave it on the side. But really leaving it on the side, we could tell you is even permitted, even if it's not garvakatim. Torah Gemara says, Hachi Ashta, is that a comparison? Hasam over there, I could understand Noit L'Machzirin. Why does it say but regarding taking off? Taking off, like you said, yeah, you don't have to have it with garvakatim. I could understand because taking off and putting back on are bechad makom, is in one place, meaning you can't put back if you never took it off. So I have to tell you noit lo machzirin. So tana noit lo machzirin. So we said taking it off because we want to tell you putting it back on. But over here, sheimchen bechad makom, leaning it nearby is in one place, and leaving it on top is in a totally different place. So therefore, that wouldn't reject the raya. It would still seem to be that it would be forbidden to go ahead and be saimich, because you see that you need only kitma by the only when you could be saimich is when you have the ashes covering it. But the Gemara still doesn't hold that's a definitive proof. And the Gemara therefore says, my havelah. So what's the conclusion? Could you be saimich near a stove if it wasn't garvakatim, it wasn't shoveled out? So the Gemara says, Tashma, and this is the halacha from the following brisa. If you have a stove that was heated up with this mark, the refuse of the sesame seeds and wood, which are things that turn into like coals, the halacha is, you could do smicha, like Taisa says that the Gemara's conclusion is that you're allowed to do smicha near a stove that the coals were not taken out. But Taisa does point out, you cannot learn it from here that you're allowed to keep a food near the fire, because here it's different because you have the walls of the stove that's separated between you and the fire. But near the fire itself, that wouldn't tell us that would be permitted. But smich itself, the Gemara proves, is going to be permitted. Now, but the aim mekaymen, but obviously this halacha we were saying in our Mishnah, you not leave on top of the stove, elam ken gufa ketuma, unless you shovel out the coals and you cover or you cover it with ashes. Now, there's also a halacha continuing, the brisa just continues, that we already brought the raya that you're allowed to do smicha, even without garvakatim, is gechalim sha'amamu. Therefore, like the point Tyson is bringing up, which is very important. If let's say someone has a fire that's burning on Shabbos, you can't leave it near the fire necessarily. We're saying near the stove, that might be permitted, but not near the fire itself. Let's say you have coals that were dimming, or you put on top of the coals this fine chaff of the chaff of fine chaff of flax, which is like harei kektuma. That's like it's already covered with ashes. So although you didn't really cover it with ashes, but if it's dimming, it's the same point. It's to diminish the heat. Or if you cover it with this type of the chaff of the flax, it's the same idea. That's going to diminish the heat. That's going to be permitted to do as shehiyah. Now, the Gemara's next discussion presumes the following halacha. We're going to be discussing, because it's going to go back to this idea that we just mentioned regarding kitma v'huvara. If you put on the ashes and then got flared up again, so we're going to discuss that. But the premise is going to be related to the following halacha, that is, leaving on the food from before Shabbos, where it's not garf, it's not katum, you didn't shovel out the coals, you didn't cover it with ashes, the regular coals are there. So we have this machlekes that we keep on mentioning regarding Chananya and the Chacham. Chacham hold only food that's fully cooked may be left on the fire. Therefore, generally, a food that's not fully cooked is going to be forbidden without a blech, without gar v'katam. Now, Chananya held no, even food that's cooked only k'meichel ben yisai, only a third of it cooked may be left on the fire. So the next Gemara's discussion, going through Amud Beis, is primarily going to be discussing according to the opinion of Chacham. Chacham that say, unless it's fully cooked, I'll leave it on. What's halach if it is fully cooked? But it's what's called mitztamik v'yafaloi. As it shrivels, it makes it better. So though it's fully cooked, and now it's getting what's called oiskekach, it's getting overcooked, but the more it cooks, it actually makes it better. Maybe they're also concerned shemi chate. That's going to be the Gemara's discussion. So the Gemara goes as follows. It says, Amr Yitzchak bar Nachmeni Amr B'Yisha. Says, Kitma, let's say you covered the coals with ashes, but Vahover got flared up. So then the halach is as follows: Mashin la'acham and shahochmu kol tzarchen. You're allowed to leave on the stove top the hot water that was already heated up, all that's necessary, and metavshel shabisha kol tzarchen, and also the cooked dish that was cooked, all that's necessary. Because we're not concerned that you can be mechateh, even according to the chachamim. Why would I come to stoke the coals? It's already fully cooked. So you're allowed to leave it on even though it got flared up again. Says the Gemara as we continue to Beis, Shmami, number one thing we could infer from this is that mitztamik, when it continues to cook, it gets smaller and it shrivels up. But it gets better. Still, as long as it was fully cooked, it's mutter. It's permitted to leave it on the stovetop from before Shabbos, as Rashi proves. How do we know we're talking about mitztamik v'yafaloi? Because if it wasn't talking about mitztamik v'yafaloi, let's say it was being mitztamik viraloi, actually the more cooked it would get worse. What would be the chiddush? Obviously, you're allowed to leave it on, because for sure no one's being mechata if anything is ruining the food. Rather, obviously, we're told about what's called mitztamik v'yafaloi. The more cooked, the better it gets. And still, we did not make the gzeira of being mechata, because it's fully cooked. So you're not going to come to mechata. The chant, okay, it gets better, but it's fully cooked. You're not going to come to do a malacha deraisa of Shabbos. Now, why did we then say the hot water that's fully cooked? That's mitztamik virali. If you tell me the whole chiddush mitztamik v'yavali, so Rashi says that we need to tell you that yes, even for the hot water, but it has to have been totally cooked from before Shabbos. So even though it's easily cooked, it has to be fully cooked. But that is the chiddush regarding that way, but not that regarding mitztamik v'yavali. But the main primary chiddush is mitztamik v'yavali. You see, is permitted, which is going to be the hotly debated discussion of our Amud. So the Gemara, no, it's not a raya. Shani hachi here, it's different because the kitma, and there's actually the halacha l'maisa. If you went and you covered it with ashes, you revealed your intention that you don't want it to keep on cooking and get what's called oiskekach and get overcooked. And therefore, we're not concerned of shemi chate because you yourself showed you're not interested. And if you put on the blech, then that shows that you're not interested, even though here it gets flared up and it's not even existing anymore. Still, that's why it's going to be permitted. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If that's the halacha, because you put on the ashes, so Mila member, of course, what's there to say? Of course you're allowed to do shia. Everyone agrees if you do gar for cotton, if you put on the blech, it's going to be permitted. So the Gemara, no, huvra is suchalei. No, what's necessary, and if you're wondering about the logic going back and forth, that's what Taisus discusses, but huvra is suchalei. What's necessary to tell you is, yeah, but it got flared up. Now the tema, well, would you say keeping the huvra since it got flared up, hadrul lamilsa kamaisa, well, it went back to its prior state, that, okay, so now there's no blech over here. You put on a blech, but the blech's on the floor now, so it's not going to be permitted. Kamash Malan, that's what we're saying, that no, it is going to be kiktuma. Because you cover with ash, even though it got flared up, that's the chiddush we have to tell you, that yes, it's going to be permitted, but not because mitztamik v'yafal is permitted without a blech. No, it's only permitted because you put on the blech. That's going to help you, even though, quote unquote, it got undone, but still, that's why it's going to be permitted. But again, if there was no gar for katam, then I could tell you that actually mitztamik v'yafal would be usher according to the chacham. Now, similar type of discussion, we're going to have three different amaram in their machlokes of what did Rabbi Yechanan say. And it's going to go in that order. So, Amra Rabbi B'chan, Amra Rabbi Yechanan. This is the first version of what Rabbi Yechanan said, and each one has a different interpretation of what Rabbi Yechanan said. He said, Kitma v'huvra, which is essentially saying what we just said in the previous opinion, says, if you covered it with ashes and they got flared up, so you can leave on the hot water that was already fully cooked, or a dish that was fully cooked, even if the coals are roisim coals, it doesn't make a difference what the coals are. If it's fully cooked, you can leave it on, even though now essentially there's no more blech because the ashes got consumed. Says the Gemara, we can infer from this halacha is that if the more gets cooked, the better it gets. Still, it's going to be mutter. And why do we see that? Because there's no blech over here, because the ashes get consumed. So you only see a regular fire, and still we see it's permitted, even though it's going to be getting better as it cooked. So the Gemara, no, Shani Hachir, it's different, is the cotton, because originally you covered with ashes. That's why it's permitted. But if there was no blecher at all, no, I would actually tell you it's something b'yavle is also. So the Gemara, but if that's the case, that because you covered it, so the Ma'ala member, what's necessary to say that it's going to be permitted? Obviously, because you put on the blech. So the Gemara, no, over it's tzulchalei. We have to tell you, like we mentioned before, because it got flared up, you would think that would be the undoing of it. Say, no, since you did an action, even though it got consumed, you showed you didn't want it, so we're not going to shemichat anymore, where you were showing you want to actually make it less. So the Gemara, well, heinhach, that's the same as the prior teaching. So the Gemara, no, what was necessary from this teaching is to tell you that even if it's reisim coals, which are much harder than regular coals, and they don't go out so easily, as the Gemara says in Baba Bastav Ayin Dalam Beis. So therefore, we have to tell you that even so, it's going to be permitted, because even though it might be easier to be mechata, but still, you put on the ashes, you showed you didn't want it, therefore it's going to be permitted. That's one version, that Rabbi Chana says, Rabbi Yechanan, it's stomach v'yafaloi. If it gets better, it's forbidden, unless ketuma was attempted. Even though it got flared up, but you showed you didn't want it, so then it's going to be permitted. But regular without a blech, then it's stomach v'yafaloi, even if it's already fully cooked, but it's getting better, then it's going to be us. That's one version. Amar Sheshes Amar B'Yechanan, and he says the second version of B'Yechanan. He says, Kirish Esikul B'Gevez B'Eitzim. If you have a stove that was heated up with something that creates coals, with wood or with this mark, then mashnala you could leave on it. What could you leave on it? Chamin shaloi huchmu kol tzarkan. Hot water that wasn't fully cooked. V'tavcha shaloi bishul kol tzarkai. And a cooked dish that wasn't fully cooked, even if you didn't put on ashes or shovel out the coals, which that's like Hananya, who he says as long as it was a third cooked, even if it's not even fully cooked, you're allowed to leave it on, which as Rashi points out, because this is a machlekes amar Rabbi Yechanan. First version of Rabbi Yechanan held that he's like Drabanan, and even all the more so, even more, that even mitzamek v'yafalei is aser. Here he's going, no, even food not fully cooked, mitzamek v'yafalei is going to be mutter. Now, akar, if you took it off, that's where, and that's how we explained the Mishnah, then lo yakster, then you cannot put it back on Shabbos, at shiur, until you first either shovel out the coals, or if it was shoveled out, or you cheat and ate for, or you put on ashes, because Kasavri, this version of Rabbi Yechanan held, that Masnit in the halacha of our Mishnah that said Achi Yigrov was lahag sutanan, was talking about regarding Chazara, where still did not permit you to put it back on until you shovel out the coals. And as we explained the halacha of the Mishnah on the previous daf, because the Chesur Mechzer, that word's missing, which you have to say that their discussion was regarding Chazara, but therefore when you took it off, you can't put it back because the coals weren't shoveled out. Avalicious, but to leave it on from before Shabbos. That we said Mashin, you can leave it on in the garf in the cotton, even though it wasn't shoveled out, and even if it wasn't covered with ashes. That's the second version of Rabbi Yechanan, which is going like Hananya. Now, on this interpretation, Amar Rabbi, he says, Tavai Tinini. He says, both these halachas were taught explicitly, were taught in Mishnayos already, both the halacha of that you're allowed to leave it on from before Shabbos if it wasn't shoveled out, which that we learned explicitly in the Mishnah, an anonymous Mishnah that's going to be permitted. And also regarding when you took it off, you're now put it back until it's gar v'kadim. We also learned in the Mishnah. So why did Rabbi Yechanan, according to this version of Hashesh, have to tell us this? Where do we see both of these halachas in the Mishnah? So he explains. Lishes Tanina, we're going to leave it on from before Shabbos. We learned that it's permitted even if it's not gar v'kadim. That's a Mishnah for your Testament base. The Mishnah said, "Ein noisnes apas b'teicha tanim chashech." I'll put bread, dough, into the oven as it's getting dark on Shabbos, meaning right before it gets the shkia. I'll put the cookie on top of the coals, unless it's enough time that it could crust, then you'd be able to put on those few minutes before Shabbos. Now, so you now put on, if it's not going to be able to crust, but says Rava, the inference is hakarmu panaha, but if let's say the surface crusted, then shar it's going to be permitted. Now, that's obviously not fully cooked. We're saying it's just enough to crust on the outside. And it's talking about a tanner, an oven. Now, an oven is not shoveled out or covered with ashes, because as Rashi explains, even if you would shovel out the coals of an oven, a Mishnah later on, Daf Yomi is going to tell us that Gerufa and Ketuma doesn't help by a tanner, because it's way more intense heat. And if even if you shovel out the coals, we're still concerned. Now, for sure, for bread, Rashi points out, where your intention is to, definitely when you put it in, is not to like just leave it on the stove, it's to bake it, and still we see that if it's not fully cooked, it's permitted. So we already see like Hananya in that Mishnah of your Testament base, which is what you're coming to tell you that Lishas is permitted without Gerufa Ketuma. That's a Mishnah. Moreover, the second point, regarding putting back on the stove on Shabbos that you need a Gerufa Ketuma, that's also a Mishnah. Where did we learn that? That's Beis Hillel Oimrim. That we said, Beis Hillel say, Af Machzirin, you're allowed to put it back on Shabbos. Now, says the Gemara, V'ad kan like a shar Beis Hillel. Where do we find Beis Hillel saying that's permitted? That's Ela Gerufa Ketuma. That's only if it's shoveled out or covered with ashes, because when the Mishnah talks about chazara putting on Shabbos, that's after they already developed the premise that it has to be garf already. Because we said, lo yitin, I'll put it on, ad sheyigrif. So as we explained the Gemara, whether you're the one who says it's saying lo yisha, or whether you're saying lo yachzer, either way, we said that at the end of the Mishnah, when you say you're allowed to put it back on, is going back on when, but the coal's already shoveled out, which is what the halach of the Mishnah is saying, ad sheyigrif. So that's when you can't put it back on. That's when you could put on when it's going for cotton. But if it's not shoveled out or covered with ashes, then you can't. So you see the halacha that chazar is us until you do gufa ketuma. So what's Rabbi Yochanan going to teach us? Both those halachas that Rav Shesha and Rabbi Yochanan is a Mishnah. Says the Gemara, you're right, but Rav Shesha's nami, what was his purpose? Was diyuka de masnid kamashman. He was coming to tell us the inference of the Mishnah, which actually Machlokes Rashi and Taisus, which Mishnah is he coming to say the dik? Rashi says ultimately the Mishnah does not explicitly say if you get a crust on the bread, then it's permitted. It just says, if it's not going to be crusted, it's forbidden. So he's telling you the dig, but if it's crusted, it's going to be permitted, which Taisus says, come on. Says, that doesn't seem the pshat, because that's an obvious inference. Since it's saying, you could only do it until you get a crust, obviously it's saying, but if it's crusted, it's permitted. Rather, he says, it's the dig of our Mishnah, of Perikira, that our Mishnah, it says, lo yitin, the simple translation, like the other opinion, that actually not like Chananya, that you can't put on this regarding Shia. But you have to explain, as we said in the previous episode, and that's that diak of the chesur mechsur, that's Rav Shesha is coming to tell us that actually that the prohibition of chazara is until you gar for kata. But be that as may, Rashi says that we leave the pot on the stove, even if there's no blach, if it's a third cooked, is like Chananya, because like our Gemara is pointing out, we have a Stamas Nitin, this anonymous Mishnah that says like him, which is the Mishnah of Yutes, which says Hakarmu Panau, if it at least got crusted, which is not fully cooked, it's going to be permitted, even though it's not fully cooked. And additionally, our Gemara, we have Rav Shesha, named Rabbi Yochanan, saying like him, that he explains the Mishnah, that when do you need Gufa Ketum, it's only for Chazara, but for Shi you don't. So therefore, Rashi and Taisa both say the halach is like Chananya, as Ramah brings it down. But all the Marim that say it's Aser is because they hold the Mishnah is Lishesnan, which again we didn't resolve it, but that's what the Machlek is based on. But it sounds like from all these rayas that the halach is like Chananya. That was the second version of Rabbi Yochanan. Now we go to the third version. Amr Shmuel bar Yehuda Amr Rabbi Yochanan. He says a different version. He says Kirish Esiku begebas be'etzim. He says a stove that was heated with this mark and this wood, which again make coals. Mashna tavsha shabisha cold tzarka. You could leave on a cooked dish that was fully cooked. No hot water that was fully cooked. And even if the more cooks, the better it gets, still it's permitted. So it's like Drabanan, it has to be fully cooked, but it's the more lenient interpretation. So therefore, we had these three different interpretations of Yechanan. The first one was like Drabanan, like Drabanan, that it's only going to be permitted if you have ketuma. Only then is mitztamik v'yafalei permitted. But if not, if there's no blech, then although it's fully cooked, if it gets better as it cooked, it's going to be awesome. Then we had Rav Sheshes, who Rabbi Yochanan is not like Rabban, it's like Chananya. Even food that's not fully cooked, just a third cooked, even if it's stomach v'yafalai, it's going to be mutter. Then we had this last version of Shmuel Yehuda. He says it's like the Chachamim, but more lenient than the first one. The stomach v'yafalai is going to be mutter, as long as it's fully cooked. Even if there's no blech, it's going to be permitted. Now, however, the one who said this last interpretation, Yehuda, one of the rabbis asked him, he said, both Rav and Shmuel, they say that if it gets better as it cooked, it's actually forbidden to put on without a blach, because you might be mechata, all the fire is going out. You might come to stoke the coals, so you see that it is asa. Somebody said to him, what do you think? I don't know. The Amr of Yisrael, Amr of Yehuda, Amr Shmuel. You don't think I don't know that Shmuel said mitztamik v'yafalei asa, that if it gets better as a cook, it's forbidden? I know that they say it's forbidden. Ki kamin elach. When did I tell you? Rabbi Yochanan kamin. I was going in Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says that it's going to be permitted. Now, as the Gemara actually brings from the later Amiram, the Amli Rav Ukva Mimeshon Rav Ashi says, Atu dimekrevis to Rabbi Shmuel. You're close to the place of Rabbi Shmuel. Savidik Rabbi Shmuel. So then you have to do like Rabbi Shmuel, that they say that mitztamik v'yafalei is going to be aser. But we do like Rabbi Yochanan, and therefore it's going to be permitted. Now, related discussion. Amalei Abai Rav Yosef. Abai says to Rav Yosef, he says, Ma'ulishas. What's the halacha? Are you allowed to do shehiyah? You're allowed to leave on from before Shabbos if there's no gar for katan, which either that the question is if it's not fully cooked, and then as Tais explains, the question is going to be, is the halacha like Rabbanu Chananya? Or we're talking about that it's fully cooked, but the more cooked, the better it gets. And then the question is, if you hold like Rabbanan, is the halacha like Rabbi Shmuel, who says it's aser, or like Rabbi Yochanan, who says mutter? But be that as it may, when it's generally, we have this machlekes, what's halacha to do shiyah when there's no blech? So Amalei said to him, Rabbi Yehuda mashu levachal. He would leave on the food, even though there was no blech, even though it wasn't shoveled out, and he would eat it. So you see, it's permitted to do shiyah even without a blech. So Amalei says, no, bar mined Rabbi Yehuda. Don't make me arrive from Rabbi Yehuda. They keep in the Mesukan, who, since he was someone that was always in danger for his life, because he would have this disease called bulmus, he would have these seizures, and he had to eat some sweet and good food. So even on Shabbos he was permitted to go out and cook food, because he's a chaylish yesh b'sakana. But leave a lachmaya. My question was, regular people like me and you, are you allowed to do shehiyah without, let's say we'd say like Hananya, without a blech, as long as it's the third cooked? So Amalei says, Besura Mashu, in Surah, they would do shehiyah. The Harav Nachman by Yitzchak was Marida Uvda, he was someone that was very meticulous in his actions and deeds to keep to the halacha, and he would do shia and he would eat it. So you see that that's permitted to do, like Tesa and Rashi both say that the halacha is kananya, even for shia it's permitted. For shia it's permitted without a blech, as long as it was a third cook. Now the Gemara brings another story that Omer Rav Ashi says, Keimna Kamed Rav Huna, he says, I was in front of Rav Huna, V'shon le kasa de harsna, and they did shia, they left on the fire from before Shabbos going into Shabbos, this cooked fish that's cooked in its fats with flour. And they ate on Shabbos. Now he says, but I don't know, why did they do this? Is it because he holds in his stomach mutter? Because, even though this cooked fish dish, the more cooks, the better it gets, but still he holds like Rabbi Yochanan, that's going to be mutter. Or mishum de kivin this b'mecha. No, maybe since this dish of fish, that actually, since it has flour inside of it, mitztamik v'ralehu, as we're going to shortly explain, when you have something with flour, the more cooked actually, the worse it gets. So maybe that's why. So maybe he even was like ruling like Rav, that it generally would be forbidden mitztamik v'ralehu, but it's actually mitztamik v'ralehu. The more cooked, the worse it gets. So he doesn't know really why. It's not a Rav from Rav Huna. The mistamik v'yavle is mutter, because maybe that cooked fish dish, since it has flour, actually is considered mistamik virali. So the Gemara now brings some halachas related. The Amar of Nachman, and this the halacha actually follows like this next ruling. Mistamik v'yafalai, if the more cooks, the better it gets. Aser is still going to be forbidden, because we're still concerned that you might come to be mechata. Mistamik virali, if the more cooks, then it's going to be more, then it's going to be permitted. Kol the milsa, the general rule is kol the isbe mecha, whatever has flour in it, mistamik virali. The more cooks, the worse it's going to get, and then it's going to be permitted to leave on without a blech. Except for a dish of turnips, the avagav the isbe mecha, even though it has flour, mitztamak v'yaflehu. It's considered that the more cooks, the better it gets. So then it would be forbidden without a blech. Now, but when did we say this? Is only the isbe bisra. Only if that turnip dish has meat. Then the more cooked, the better it gets, because the fat of the meat, it breaks the intensity of the turnips, as the Gemara says in Brachas of Mendal Mabez. So then it keeps on getting better. I have a less babisra, but if there's no meat, mitztamik v'ralehu, again, then since it has flour, actually the more cooks, as we say, whenever there's flour, the worse it gets. Now, moreover, v'chi is babisra nami, well, in our review we'll show the three qualifications. V'chi is babisra nami, that even when there is meat, loyman, we didn't say that it's considered mistamik v'yafalei because the meat makes it gets oiskaka better like a good shalom. No, that's ella dulei kabayil al-archen, only if you don't need it for guests. But if you need it for guests, then you need to have distinguished piece of meat to put in front of them. It's not respectful to put in front of them a flesh where you can't recognize the meat, where they just got dissolved in the chalon. Then actually mitztamik v'ralehu. Then it's actually going to be considered. The more cooks, the worse it's going to be, and then we're not concerned that you're going to be mechata. And the Gemara just ends off lafta, a dish that's made from figs, and daisa, like a type of a porridge, but tamri, and a dish made out of dates, mitztamik v'ralehu, and the more they cook, the worse it gets, and again, therefore that would fall under the criterion of being permitted to do shia, even without a blech. Now, some ideas we spoke about in today's daf, and Shabbos Daf Lamed Zayin, was a continuation of the previous daf, where we were discussing if the Mishnah is like Chananya, because what did we say that you need to have Grufa Ketuma for was only for Chazara, but Shehiyah is actually going to be permitted even without Grufa Ketuma, as long as you have food that's a third cooked. So then that's what's called Michael Ben Drusai. So then go ahead. leave it on the fire even without a blech. When did we say you need to have a blech? When does he need to do gar for cut? That's regarding turning it on Shabbos. Oh, that needs gar for cut. That was the question. Or maybe, no, Lishais Tanan, which is like the opinion of the Rabbanan, that no, even to leave it on from before Shabbos, you need to have Gufa Ketuma, you need to have a blech until it's fully cooked. So we try to bring two rayas. One was from the explanation of Reb Chelba in the Mishnah. This is Loisha that we didn't learn, it's permitted in the Mishnah, only on top, but not inside. Okay, so the Gemara says, well, that makes sense if you learn what's called Lahag Zertanan. If you say that that's when we said you need to have gar for katim, which then the diuk is that by shehiyah, by leaving on, then you don't need, which again, that's like Hananya, just to point it out again. So that's what we could understand, that's what Rabbi Chelba was coming to say. This, that by shehiyah, by leaving before Shabbos, you don't need a blech, that's only on top. But inside, from before Shabbos, that would be a problem, because that's Hatimon the Beremetz. That's obviously going to be Aser. So that would make sense. But if you say Shehiyah Tanan, that we say you need to have Gurfa Ketuma, so what's the difference on inside from on top? Why should be any different? There's nothing inside the stove. It's all shoveled out. So why should be any difference on the top or inside? So the Gemara says, no, it's not a rai, because it's the halacha Reb Chelba is going on the Seifa, which was talking about Chazara. And that's what we're talking about, that even though it's Gar for Katim, it's still going to be Aser inside. And that's what we're coming to say because of a different concept known as Mechzi Kamavashal. If you're putting it inside, that really looks like you're cooking. And so therefore, that's when it's going to be Aser. And therefore, it's not a raya. Let me try attempted raya number 2. We brought a raya of these, what's called these twin stoves. We said one is shoveled out, one's not shoveled out. Okay, that's not so relevant. We're going to come back to that in a second. We said you're allowed to do shehiyah on the one that's shoveled out. Now, there was machlekes Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. We're not going to really discuss Reb Meir. Reb Meir really was the most stringent of all with shehiyah and chazara. He's for sure not like the halacha of our Mishnah. But then the question was Rabbi Yehuda. He said that's really like the halacha of our Mishnah. But that's only if you hold our Mishnah was talking about shehiyah. For shehiyah, you need to have Gufa Ketuma. Then, regarding the machlekes Beisham and Misil, he's literally exactly the word for word for our Mishnah. But if our Mishnah is Tuma Chazara, which means to say, but shehiyah, everyone agrees, is mutter without Gufa Ketuma, so then he's not even like Rabbi Yehuda. So our Mishnah is not going to be like either one of the Tanoim. Says the Gemara, no. It's like Rabbi Yehuda by one point, which is exactly the wording of a Mishnah. He disagrees on one point, just that in our Mishnah holds it's even without Gufa Ketuma, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that you need Gufa Ketuma. So we could say he's the Tana, but again, it's just different on that one point. So therefore, the Gemara has not resolved if the halacha is like Hananya or like the Rabbanan, which again, we have the Ramah, we have the Shulchan Aruch, that still till today we have that debate regarding it's the halacha like Hananya or like the Rabbanan. Then we had a different question. What's halacha? Can you do smicha? Can you lean a pot right on the walls of the oven? So we said it's not a raya from that brayso we brought before regarding the twin ovens. Then we said it's mutter on the one that's garva katim. Hey, wait a second. Isn't it getting the heat from the wall of the other one? So isn't that really lismich? And you see that it's mutter? So the Gemara says no. Since it's on the top of the stove, so it's high up. So therefore you get the ear space, you get the ventilation. Therefore it's aser. But maybe smich would be actually. That's why it's mutter. Maybe smicha would be asa. On that, the Gemara concludes ultimately smicha, even not garva katim, is going to be permitted. Then the Gemara discussed regarding what's called kitma behuvera. If you put ashes on and then they got heated up, so then the halacha is that we said you're allowed to leave on from before Shabbos if it's fully cooked. So then the Gemara wanted to say, so you see, even though it got flared up, so it's like there's no blech. And still you say, as Rashi pointed out, it must be talking about mitztamik v'yafalei, because mitztamik v'ralei, of course, we're not concerned shemichata, and still we see a lot of leave it on. So mitztamik v'yafalei you see is mutter. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a rai, because you put on ashes. You showed that you don't want it, so therefore that's what's permitted. So then why do we have to say, of course, if there's a blech, you're allowed to leave it on? No, because even though it got flared up, and even by the case of Gachal Mishal Reisim, where it's really like strong cold, you would think that we would be good to Shemichata. No, since you showed you don't want it, therefore it's going to be permitted, but maybe without a blech, Mistamik v'yafal actually would be aser, which actually that brings us into the 3 different opinions in Rabbi Yechanan. The first one says, like we said before, that what? Mistamik v'yafalai is going to be asr. The second interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan was no, like Hananya, even actually a third cooked is actually mutter, actually even without gar v'katim for shehiyah. And the third version was, yes, like the Rabbanon, it has to be fully cooked. Without that, you can't do it out of blech. But even mitzamik v'yafalai is going to be mutter. But again, we ruled that the halacha is like the first version, that mitzamik v'yafalai is going to be asr. Then we spoke about if someone left on karsa daharsana, these cooked fish with flour, so we weren't sure why he said it's permitted. Is it because, even though it's yafalai, but he rules that it's mutter? Or no, since it's flour, then it's actually viraloi, because flour is viraloi, and therefore that's why it's going to be permitted. But actually, maybe because mistamik viraloi, we hold it actually aser, which that we qualified. This that we said that flour is mistamik viraloi, that's only but there's an exception by a date dish, that there it's actually yafaloi, but only if it has meat, and only if you don't need it for guests. Because if you need it for guests, it's mistamik viraloi, because you don't want it to keep on shriveling up and getting ice kakach. And even by the date dish, since there's flour, it would actually get worse. It's only the meat that makes it taste better that it actually becomes mistamik viraloi. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.